I'd like to welcome you to the first in our fall lecture series. Today we have Warren Schwartz and Angela Hyatt from Schwartz Silver. Warren is conducting an advanced studio this fall and was asked by the department because he's a distinguished practitioner as well as a beautiful designer, and brings a level of consistent and insistent professionalism to his own work and I hope to the teaching of the studio. So we're very fortunate to have Warren and Angela here today.
Well, it's interesting that this is distinct from the theoretical lectures because he's quite right. This is not a theoretical lecture. This is a lecture of, in a sense, reality, because I can tell from the name Survivor 33rd season. We have been doing that for 33 years, and actually this first slide really is just to show you a range of the work that we've done. And actually, this is not 33 years worth. This is a lot less, but it's kind of representative of what we have been doing.
The first pictures are kind of really the building was designed kind of from the inside out as kind of a user experience, a storyboard with an exhibit designer.
We started out by having a very large program produced by the exhibit designer of a path through from let's call it through the old building to the shore, and then through various depths of the ocean into the deep ocean, which you see here, and then back out. So this is the full impact of the aquarium that you see in the sort of master plan model, which includes also an IMAX theater, which is the little kind of chip off the iceberg on the left.
This is the original Hyde Park Branch Library. Hyde Park is part of the city of Boston. It was made part of Boston in early 1900s. This is not a true Carnegie library, but it was very much built like the Carnegie Library. Follow that model, a centralized, kind of solid block, kind of aloof a little bit from the city, from the neighborhood, and it was built in 1899. This is how we found it in 96 when the project started. It had a one-story addition put on to the side of it just 1 year after it was originally built. So we came up with three different diagrams of how to add on to this building, very parties that we kind of met with the city about. One was the bookend scheme, which we actually called the earmuff scheme in the office. Just dumb and simple. You can keep the symmetry. You can split the new program in two and add a little bit on each side. And yes, it doesn't take full advantage of the site available on the right, which is the south side of the site, but that's one option. Another option is what we call the pavilion scheme, getting rid of the stack swing, creating this bar at the back that would connect everything, but treating most of the addition as this pavilion out on the front facing the street. We, as architects, like this because it gave us the most opportunity to have kind of distinct addition, but the city didn't like it because it would increase their staffing levels at the library exponentially, they told us, because they can't see around corners, and just one of those realities that we had to deal with working with the client. The last dumb diagram was say, okay, fine, let's not be too clever about this. You could also just put all the addition on one side of the building. If you do that, though, the addition is going to be bigger than the original building. And how would that look and feel? but this was kind of a starting point, a way to think about how to add on to a historic building and how to think about how the facade might respond to the existing building. In this case, the bas-relief panels and the kind of syncopation within the facade, and then seeing the structural expression on the outside. We also kind of liked how it made larger open spaces inside the building. So our little diagram, now this is a little hand sketch. It was probably this size, actual size, on a piece of tracing paper. And I hope everyone still sketches when they think of ideas, because it's hard to kind of capture the essence of some of these ideas on the computer directly. But this was kind of the original little concept sketch, was to say, well, what if we kept the stack swing and that little piece on the side of the building that they had built, and we mirror that as a connector piece to kind of fortify or build up the presence of the existing building, and then create an addition that's kind of the antithesis of that, kind of the glass conservatory wing to the solid masonry block. And then you can kind of add other pieces as you need to get the full program in. Other kind of little, again, these were seriously like 2-inch square little sketches of how to kind of think about adding on to the building. So kind of taking our original colored pencil elevations and kind of building a little animation of it. Isn't that word very we would take that existing little addition that was built. We'd actually make it a 2-story addition. We kept it in place and built a story on top of it. Mirror it on the other side, and then create addition, the larger addition on the end. This is the lower level. So this is the finished product. This got a 2000 National AIA Honor Award in 2001, and was a really interesting project to work on from start to finish. This is kind of.
I think the reason it won is because it was one of the original Carnegie libraries, and there'd been this argument going on for, I don't know, 5 to 10 years about postmodern buildings, modern buildings, how you add on to these things, how do you design a new building. We're past that, but this is the part of the argument, and I think that there was a fresh, believe it or not, a fresh view as to how you could actually put a new building onto an old one, make the two things actually merge into one building again of two contrasting parts.
So here's the interior, the original south side elevation of the building became kind of an interior piece of the architecture. We kind of treated the main glassy part of the addition as this kind of outdoor room, so you see outdoor materials in the room and all that kind of thing. So this is our version of this double height new reading room space. And it's not all double height, but we wanted to still kind of create that feeling of lightness. So we did this kind of cowboy system of a luminous ceiling that's kind of built from just very ordinary parts. The budget for this project was not extravagant, so there was a lot of on-the-fly thinking of how to bring it all together. And this is the new south side of the building that faces the garden.
This is a public building, and budgets for public buildings are notably average budgets, maybe slightly below average budgets. But the reason I mention this is because as soon as you get out of school, there's an overlay of the numbers, the dollars, and it becomes amazingly important because I don't think it limits your creativity. I think it just limits your your options about how to use the dollars. And so you end up having to be as clever as possible, and yet it doesn't always look that way. So this is another public building, which was completed in 2005, so we're moving forward in time a little bit. This building was also still a building which I think this was not drawn in the computer until the very end, maybe until the end. So it's amazing how quickly things have changed once they started to change. This is the new LSU Museum of Art, which was going to be on this sort of empty meadow at the bottom right of this kind of triangle of space, 4 miles out of the city and near LSU University. They asked us to do some site plans to look at ways of putting not only one building, but actually putting a second building on this site. And so you see here various ways of going about it. One of the interesting things is that the reason you see some water there is because we had to retain water, which comes in large quantities to the southern part of Louisiana.
I just want to say one thing. This is a site outside of Baton Rouge, right? The suburb.
Right.
Yeah. So just kind of go with the survivor theme. One thing that firms, that are around as long as this firm has been around need to do is to become adaptable and to kind of, when project parameters change drastically, we need to just jump on it and roll with it, and that's what happened with this project, which you're going to probably talk about.
This is surprising.
And also kind of with the firm as a general, the type of projects, the aquarium versus a historic renovation addition with the Hyde Park Library and his now new ground up museum. So.
Well, this museum started out being a museum only, and much larger than the one that they had at the university, which was just hidden inside the tower, which is the icon of the university. But they also, at a certain point, a little bit after this, they decided that they would add a large, or around the time this was being done, a large auditorium. This figures in later. But you can see here that that we had to bring people along. Actually, serve kind of we were the education component of the of the client, and so starting at the top and then moving our way down through the various kind of schemes. They all had the same plan, but we actually arrived at the bottom after a major presentation to the entire LSU system. That was unexpected because they were basically starting and ending at the top. That's what the buildings at LSU look like. Their expectations were basically a sugar plantation. And in fact, they had one and showed us a lot of even took visits. So this is the building, which is very conscious of the weather there being incredibly hot and incredibly rainy, and sunny, rainy. And just some quick early renderings about what the building might look like. You can see that it has not what I would call not too much of a facade, more of creating an environment, kind of almost a natural environment. Everything was raised on a platform for two reasons. One is so the water would drain into a drainage pond, but the other reason was because LSU, in terms of bringing a little bit of what they recognized to the site, LSU was raised, all the buildings there are raised up about 2 or 3 feet to be above the ground, in the groundwater. And so this building, as all the other buildings at LSU, were raised on platforms. The great thing was that that project ended about the time we finished design development, and then somebody else had a better idea. In fact, the mayor, and said, "Why don't we move the LSU Museum downtown, combine it with a new theater, put it on this site here, which was seen as being the new center of the city, defined by Duane, Andres Duane, and their group as being a place which would be the new city center in a sense. And so it's interesting, the city center became a museum and theater. Next to the old state capitol, in case you weren't sure what that building was. So in I think something like 11 days, we designed very quickly tests of the program, and you can see the theater is the lower building to the right. Then this was another version of it, where the museum was inside this glass, the circulation would be on the outside, and the theater would be, again, to the right of it on a different site. They were two different donors, and so the two donors wanted to have their own image, their own icon, let's say. But ultimately, there was this one grand meeting where there were really a couple hundred people there, and they chose the third version, which is the most unlikely version, which was kind of a giant canopy of the museum up at the top, a big hole in the middle, and theater over to the right. And then through a series of meetings, which probably lasted a few months, maybe as many as 9 months, and we showed various other alternatives. And this is part of this long sort of process. It seems long when we think back, but it actually was relatively short, because this project started in 2000 and was finished in 2005. So this is the first version. Another possible version of the museum with the theater behind it. Maybe turning the theater and merging the two, so the museum is still up and the theater is merged with the museum itself, which is the bar at the top. So here's a low version of this, and then finally a big block version of the same, with all the same program. In the end, they decided to merge the iconography of both the museum and the theater together, create one central lobby which would link to both, and create a big vibrant sort of space in there. And this is how the building then began to develop, and we were sort of on its way. These are the functions which were then distributed within the building. Each color is a different major function. So it's a mixed-use facility with art galleries and restaurants and theater, the main stage being in the lower part. This is one of the renderings. We went through many materials, including stone, copper, glass, the whole gamut of materials, and had long discussions about each one. This is the lobby, which was supposed to link everybody, and did, in fact, and does. This is the view over the Mississippi, directly on the river. And then the building under construction. You can see it very much matches it. Bayard said something a long time back when he was alive, which was, it's interesting to me, still interesting to me, try to make the buildings look like your drawings. It's easier said than done. So this is these are the contractors putting the glass channels up in front of basically a solid building. It has one window pretty much, maybe two. But the building appears to be glass. It is, in fact, it's a rain screen covering an aluminum surface with various uses at the ground floor, the fourth floor, and the roof. And this is the building at night, the lobby in the daytime, the theater, 350 seats, one of the museum spaces with skylight. And then using the roof at the top because of the weather. And in fact, it should be covered with, at this point, with wisteria, the trellis, provide shade, and view back over the river and the old state capitol. This I think then opened in 2005, won a National Honor Award in 2008, and you can see there's some relationship between these two buildings, even though they're so different. And this was on the cover of Architecture magazine. May 2005. Oh, one more here. One or two more, depending on how much time if I can get through this. We're doing this project right now. This is where do I start? Start with maybe with 9/11. Federal office buildings all over the country were both needed to be modernized, which means new modern systems inside, and also to be secured from any threats. And so the project here was to design and develop a new entrance pavilion at the entrance to the McCoy Federal Office Building in Jackson, Mississippi. It seems like a lot of architects, ones that you have heard of and have read about, enter this sort of design excellence program by the General Services Administration. We were doing this particular job and have been doing it, and in fact, it should be done this month or maybe next. We're not sure, but I'll show you. We'll fast forward to those pictures. Just the location of the office building downtown, the middle thing. Jackson is pretty low population, sort of wiped out kind of area, but it's trying to come back. And the federal office and the feds are trying to change the image of the federal government by adding pieces of building which would be welcoming to buildings that you see, like that concrete building on the right, which is the federal office building. Most federal office buildings of late, after the 40s and 50s, started to look like this because they took the lowest bidder. They went away from design excellence to, I guess, low bid, and they've been trying to switch that back now for about 10 or 20 years, back to where federal buildings become leadership buildings, what I would call leadership buildings, leading other architectural, other buildings, other architects and buildings into making better architecture. This is the way the building was before. You enter underneath the tower. If there was a threat underneath the tower, it would basically endanger the lives of 3,000 people in the building. So the object was to make a pavilion outside the building, which if anything happened, the building itself would be destroyed and the rest of the building would remain intact. So this is a very tall version of a new entrance pavilion, sort of on the nose of the triangle. Another one which is a very different and dramatic shape, still kind of working off the triangles of the angularity of the other building, but providing an entrance. Another way of sort of going about it, maybe taking the facade and folding it out so that it becomes this kind of shadow boxes as kind of a roof under which and through which you enter. This was a different view with kind of a magnolia blossom, and as this developed through the various discussions that we had about the area, about the flowers and about the weather, and also about the river, which somehow forms iteratively went back and forth between various curves and various imagery. And so this magnolia blossom turned into something like ribbons, which really were more like the rivers that run in the flat land. Here you can see that the plan goes directly into the renovated elevator core and stays away from the building itself. And so this became the design of the alternatives, which was chosen by the federal government, which I thought was extraordinary, and because this now becomes what I would call, in the realm of buildings done by the federal government, again, trying to change the nature and the image of the federal government. Just some circulation diagrams and some landscape done by Hargraves Associates. Landscape around the building. Hargraves, you may be familiar with, designed the Olympics, the London Olympic master plan and grounds. So this is how the new building and the old building relate. Of course, they don't, in a sense, in one sense, but they relate by contrast. And it's important that the new pavilion be so dramatic, in a sense, that the older building, the office building, serves as a backdrop. So there's some drawings here of and the model. As you can see from this model, there was a printed model, something which I've here for. we've been doing that, of course. Then kind of a depiction of what it would look like with the shingles, glass shingles, on the building. Again, sort of, I wouldn't call it an invention, but sort of a use of another material. Still, everything being white or in the light color that is sometimes necessary, mostly required in climates like this. This is what I was referring to as the river, kind of inviting the building to be more like rivers, and which then became what we were pursuing as the building itself. This is when we got far along in these presentations in Washington, a few of them, and this building is both kind of I guess you'd call it attractive and spiky at the same time. Welcome, but and the inside being very keeping a lot of the light out, but letting light in through a huge skylight. But that skylight has a cowling above it, direct sun entering the space. Again, another rendering. A mock-up showing the glass in Kansas City. This building was also made by Zahner Company, the original aquarium, and another building that you may know. They expanded into glass, but you can see all of these pieces are aluminum cut by water laser. I'm not sure if that's what you call it, but that's what it was. All fabricated by in the computer. A real close up of the and then as the building was coming along, being built and being wrapped and clad, this building is where you come in. You don't have to actually go into the federal office building. You can get tax forms and Social Security. You can basically be served by something like 18 or 19 offices that are within the building, but a lot of that can occur in the lobby space. Also, they want to use the lobby space for receptions. So you see the building here, not all that long ago, being built near completion. The inside space here, this is probably what it looked like maybe a couple weeks ago, and all that white cabinetry is all Korean, and it's quite a large space because people are coming and going in there, and they go through photometers and security all the way in and out. And this is, I think, the last picture of this. Yeah, and so this is what the building is looking like now. The landscape is just beginning to go in. The paving has been rejected by the landscape architect because they didn't build it properly. But actually, it may stay this way, and I'm going to love it. We do. Let's see. We could entertain questions. We do have another project which we're just beginning at Community College, but we may want to discuss. We may. I think that's the last. Yes.
Warren, I have a silly question, which is, what was that, the building next to the, in Baton Rouge, the hall thing? Which shows that.
Oh, that's a good question, actually. That's the reason Baton Rouge is there is because let's begin with, is because they put the waterworks on the Mississippi River in that location. And what the waterworks did was they took water underground and made it so that it was drinkable water. And it's basically a water plant. And that's right in front of the Shaw Center on the banks of the Mississippi, the building being about a block back. So that's the water tower, but they used to be called standpipes. And it looks like a rocket, and no one in town really liked it, except we loved it. And in fact, we loved it so much, it was all basically kind of turning gray and dark, and all it needed was a paint job. And so it became the standpipe is really an historic structure going all the way back to the beginning of Baton Rouge, and that's on access with a little alley that goes right through the lobby from the street behind the building, and it in a sense paid for the whole project. Good question.
I love the design that you did for the Hyde Park Library, and I wondered if you have seen the downtown public library here in Providence, and the addition that they put on there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's kind of sad to me because, you know, what you mentioned about a lot of times with add-ons, you end up entering through the add-on or through like a hallway or something in between the two, and that has definitely happened there. So you don't get the grandeur of going through the front, those beautiful front steps and the front door.
We've gotten into doing more and more public buildings, although we still do. We have a house going up right now as well. But the public buildings are just they require a lot of time and a lot of and somehow kind of preaching to people who should know better. But it's definitely a challenge to do public buildings, and it's another kind of challenge to do.
And that was one of the demands that they made about the project that we were on board with. You know, that's one of those things. Well, we still have to enter through the front door. Like that. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
We had been up to maybe 35 people at once, and somewhere over the past 3 or 4 recessions, we've been down as low as 7 people. We have truly survived in the sense that we just never know, and other architects don't know if they're going to kind of make it through the recession or not. And this latest one has been either the worst or at least comparable to the worst, and still kind of going on. Although things seem to be better at this point. And it's interesting how you kind of how